Alright folks, let's try to do this again. And this is going to be the last time I talk about this. And it's going to be because YouTube is stupid. YouTube is stupid. The Christians on YouTube, all of y'all get on my last nerve. All of y'all make me sick. You really do. All the way up to people like Corey Minor. You make me utterly sick. You are so childish and immature. Okay? You really are for not being able to see right through all this. You, like a common, non-church going, non-Christian infidel, you just watch this material and claim to be doing your own judgment about it, and your judgment was wrong. And I'm not saying that because Marvin Sapp here went to the Ricky Smiley show. I've always had a problem. I believe it's Ricky Smiley, that's the comedian, who spent a lot of time wearing a dress, so I'm not really, but I love me some Medea, and he wears a dress, okay? I don't know. I think that there's a fine line between being transgender or even trying to encourage anybody to be transgender and a man showing that, he can be the best, woman with a prostrate to do a show. I like Tyler Perry, but everybody wants to, and it ain't because Tyler Perry wears a dress, because who didn't wear a dress? Okay, everybody in Hollywood at some point in time, most of y'all, especially if you black, you wore a dress. Sometimes Martin Lawrence did it, Will Smith did it. I think Eddie Griffin did it. A lot of people did it. Cat Williams did it. Not Cat Williams. Never Cat Williams. I'm sorry. I get him and Kevin Hart mixed up. Kevin Hart did it. Okay. You got to be careful how you hate on people and why you hate on people. You got to know people's intention, and a lot of people wouldn't be where they're at if they hadn't went out of their way to make you laugh, if they hadn't went out of their way to make you cry, if they hadn't went out of their way to write the perfect song, be the perfect comedian or whatnot. Okay, a lot of people would not be anywhere in life if they didn't go out of their way for others, to entertain others. Entertainment is a ministry. Okay, that's separate from this video though. What Marvin Sapp was doing with the 40,000 wasn't no entertainment. The convention center, the ministry, had a need. They had a budget, like this brother said. They had a budget. And his name here, welcome to, I'd like you to meet Mr. John Amachukwu, however you pronounce that. This brother, pastor, I believe he is, he done a good job as far as taking Marvin Sapp's recent $40,000 story and turning it into exposing YouTube. Okay, because that's what he did here. He exposed YouTube, and mainly the Christians on YouTube, because we don't really give a rat's behind about what the world is doing when they don't know God, they don't believe in God, they don't trust God, they don't love God. We don't care what the world says. But when Christians get together and they say this garbage, like they ain't never been to church, like they ain't never gave, like they ain't never met the budget, like they ain't never ever read the Bible, they just get on YouTube and spit like this. And they go after the man of God like this. And I'm no fan of Marvin Sapp. Like I said, I'm going to say it again and again, over and over again. Marvin Sapp, that one song is why I like, not love, but like Marvin Sapp. And because of that one song and how much energy they put into it, I will always have a soft heart for Marvin Sapp, because I believe when he wrote that song, that particular song, God was with him. He had to be with him, because that song is anointed, and that is God alone. Okay? You are God alone. That's my jam. And when I shared that song in a men's meeting, I made the men listen to it, and they got mad at me because I told them, out of, whatever you think about Christian music, whatever you think about, your prayer life, whatever you think about Marvin Sapp, I said, you get up in the morning and listen to this song. Listen to this song. I wish I had my phone on, because if I had my phone on, I'd give you a little bit of taste of that song. But it's called God Alone by Marvin Sapp. Make sure my phone ain't on. I ain't going to turn it on. Yeah, I got it off to save my battery, so forget it. But this guy here, he exposed YouTube. And that's what I'm going to title this video, YouTube Exposed, because he exposed how criminal YouTube is. Because there was no reason whatsoever for them to rip this man like this without knowing the facts. Corey Minor, he spoke and didn't know the facts. Now, I didn't see this part of the Ricky Smiley show. When he first showed up on the Ricky Smiley show, he sounded like a quack. He sounded like he was a criminal. He sounded like he got busted getting away with $40,000. And Ricky Smiley, even though Ricky Smiley is his friend, Ricky Smiley cross-examined him like, he was in court. And he said, I'm your lawyer friend, So he cross-examined him like he was in court. And, Marvin, there's some things that he shouldn't have said. And Marvin did apologize for the way he said to shut the doors. But this is the thing that kills me about this whole video. This is the thing that kills me about the whole thing, okay? This is the thing that kills me. Everything I said in 2 videos talking about this Marvin Sapp $40,000 issue, this guy, John, said exactly what I said. That's the difference between people that read the Bible. Number one, read the Bible. Number two, and number two, go to church and have given a large seed, so to speak, large seed or a large sum of money to the church because the church had a need. And on this particular day, the pastor got up there and said, we have a need, we have a debt to pay. I'm asking everybody to give cheerfully, to give to the best of their ability. Now, should Marvin Sapp have said, I need everybody to give $20. I need everybody to give $100 or anything like that? Maybe not. Because, why? Because he's on idiotic, nasty, stupid behind YouTube. And they're just going to run with it and make content about it because they need the content. Because all these lazy farts, okay, don't have jobs. They just get on YouTube and they try to be lazy by monetizing their YouTube. And this goes for Christians as well as these infidels. And again, I'm not defending Marvin Sapp. I'm defending the Bible. I'm defending the faith. And I'm defending this man's right to, in a congregation of 10,000 people, to ask them to sow a generous seed. There is no law against that. None. I knew everything that John Amachuwu said here. I knew it. And I only seen, half the video. The video where, he started off. He stopped singing or whatever. And he started saying, hold on, before we close. We got one more thing to do. He started off somewhere in there. And he said, it costs to be up here, and people took that wrong. And they don't know that the Bible says much is received, much is required. People don't know the scriptures. People, because they're so unchurched, even Corey Minor, he's so unchurched that he sat there and couldn't understand. Oh my God, he said, it costs to be up here? Yeah, it does. I know. Because when I was an assistant, I was never an assistant pastor, but I was an assistant minister. I'll call myself that. I would never call myself a pastor. I was an assistant minister in my church. In other words, when the pastor needed a day off, I had to step up to the plate and preach. Me and maybe one or two other brethren, we had to take our turn. And when the pastor was in the hospital, we had to step up and conduct things until the pastor got back, that kind of thing. I knew from my pastor asking me to go places with him because he didn't want to be with a woman alone, or he didn't want to be, in the ministry. He didn't want to be with some dudes that were very unchurched and kind of gang life kind of people, that we were, helping them out with their groceries or helping them out with a sick loved one or whatever. He wanted me to go with him as not only a minister to pray and believe, but as backup. So, 2 is better than 1 and 3 is even better. Read your Bible, okay? So, he asked me to go everywhere with him and all like that. He also asked me to speak in church. He also made me president of the men's ministry. So I knew how we do it. I knew how we ask for a seat. I've gotten up there and have said, I said, hey, Pastor C, I'm going to get up here and, I'm going to ask to, and this is exactly what Marvin Sapp did. I says, I'm going to get up there and remind the people. He says, well, don't get crazy with it. I said, no, but I'm just let the people know that we have they all talking about what we need. They need to sow into what we need. They all talking about what we need. They can't understand why we ain't got the money. They're going to sow and help today. And, and I told him, he says, well, you can let them know to pay generous. So I got up there and I asked for a generous seed. And I told him, I says, and folks, remember when you're giving. Remember, we have a budget. We have a need that needs to be met in the church. You were here last week, and you know what we went through. We need to give a generous seed. I'm asking all of you, and a lot of you are well-to-do, okay? I'm asking everyone to give a generous seed when you decide, because we didn't take up an offering. We had a box there for tithes and offerings. And we had a box there for missions. And so if you were putting money in the tithes and offerings, you would put in an envelope if you were separating your tithes from your offerings. Now let me tell you something. There's all these videos. YouTube is an idiot. There's all these videos going around with all these Corey Minor type of ministers they're tagging her videos because they mentioned something about giving in these videos, and they're saying tithing is a sin. Well, tithing is not a sin. I hate to tell you, tithing is not a sin. Tithing is a way of taking 10% out of whatever you are, okay, out of your income, out of your total income, and giving it to a cause. That's what tithing is. Taking 10% out of your entire income and giving it to a cause. You don't have to be a Christian to tithe either. People tithe in big money-making corporations. People tithe. I learned to take out 2 tithes, one for the church and one from a family, and leave some money in the bank. I did that for a while because I got in on this tithing kick, this 10% kick, and I started, budgeting money that way. Now, you don't have to tithe. Tithing is like the lowest amount of money that you can give. If you say we don't tithe, we give, then you're saying that we always have to give more than 10%. If you don't tithe, you're saying that you always are going to pay more than 10%. Me, I've been so broke that I paid 5%. But I always gave. Eventually, a lot of times I would let, Sundays go by before I remember, what, I ain't gave in a while. And then you wonder why I'm broke all the time, because I'm forgetful. I forget to give. I done ran and went to McDonald's. I done ran and went shopping after church and all like that and forgot to give. And the Lord was on my case. And there were times when I left the church. And I was on my way to Kmart or whatever. And I turned the car around. I said, hold up. And I rushed back to the church, pulled up behind my pastor's car, and I said, hey, pastor. And I gave him the envelope. And he says, what's this? I says, I forgot to put this in church. He says, why don't you just bring it next Sunday? I says, I will forget. And I'm afraid I might spend the money. If the money's sitting there in front of me, I says, I would like you to take it, and okay. And he said, okay. And he put it in his pocket. Hopefully he didn't wash his clothes with, my $50 in his pocket, But, before I go out and have a good time with these kids, before I go out and meet with other brothers in the church at Ponderosa, let me go and take this money that I promised to, And so, because I gave that money, when I got to Ponderosa, okay, I was thinking about the budget we going to spend to eat, and there's nothing wrong with that, okay? Now, some people say, well, if you got a budget, how you going to eat? Then, you shouldn't be giving money to the church. Well, we'll debate that. But anyway, this guy, John Amachukwu, exposed YouTube. He exposed all of y'all for being so stupid. Okay, first of all, he exposed the fact that, and like I said, I didn't see this part right here. This right here. I didn't see this part. This part, of, this right here. I did not see this part of Marvin Sapp's testimony. I did not see this. When he first got on to Ricky Smiley, I was like, dude, you sound like you apologizing. You sounding like a quack. But Ricky Smiley was able to get him to get on his high horse and talk about what the Lord called him to do. And stop putting shame about it. Now, I am concerned about people coming to his home and making threats It's first it sounded like you making stuff up, dude, but then, you know, and I don't think these are people. I don't know why, but I don't think these are people that were there at the convention center. I think these are people that I think this is all YouTube, and they're local people that watched him on YouTube and was listening to everybody's rhetoric on YouTube, and they actually approached his home, said stuff to his kids and stuff out on the street and stuff like that, gave Sapp different names, you know, made phone calls, sent letters, did threatening things to Marvin Sapp. And I would have sent a letter back and said, I haven't shot my 9 in a while. Next time you come near my home, make sure you come in the front door or the back door, whichever one you want, baby. Because my 9 needs to practice. He ain't practiced. He ain't practiced in a while. He's rusty. I need this gunpowder to do some practice. Approach my house again. Okay? And I would have said, approach my kids again, because now I got to take my 42s and my 48s, and I gotta like give them to my kids since they, you know. So, you know, just keep it up. Go ahead, keep it up. Keep it up. Okay? Because you know, God loves a cheerful giver, but Christians love a dead sinner. You know what I'm saying? Christians love a dead idiot. Okay? You know? Come around me, threaten me, talking some trash to me because you don't know how church works. And these people do not know how church works. Church, sometime in your life, especially if it's a church that's growing, it's going to ask you to sow your seed. It's going to ask you for $100,000 or more. And it may ask you for that over, depending on how many people are in a congregation, it may ask you for that over time, or it may ask you for that all in one service. But, whatever the case, there's no law against it. You need to go to church more often. And I'm not talking about no little countrified Quaker church. I'm talking about a real Pentecostal church, a real Baptist church, a real full gospel church. You need to go there. You need to go to what we call a Christian fellowship church. Stop going to these dead countrified churches where don't nobody want to get ahead. All they want to do is make enough money, okay, so that when it floods they can afford a shop vac. They ain't really trying to expand. They're not really trying to get more members. They're not trying to add more programs to the church. They're not trying to buy a church van so they can bring more people to church. They're not doing anything but showing up for church and going home. Yeah, you don't need 40,000. You don't need Marvin Sapp to take up a seat in that church. Okay? But in closing, Marvin Sapp explained exactly what I said. And I was not there, but I knew this because I go to church. And I've seen people do what Marvin Sapp did. Especially black pastors. When my pastor, Pastor Reverend Willie Spencer, when we had a convention that we did every once a month at the Days Inn Hotel. They gave us the biggest ballroom we had. And sometimes that place was packed. And sometimes there was only about 20 of us in there. It all depends on, you know, which month and what part of the year it was. But he would, you know, and it cost us to run that thing. Especially if you're going to do it every single month. And then he had a radio show. And that radio show, we really didn't have the money to run the radio show. We were basically running it like once a week. Or, not running it once a week. We were basically paying for it, every time we did it, we had to make a withdrawal and pay for the airtime and everything for that day. And the radio show ended up ending. But, he had the radio broadcast and he had the Days Inn hotel event every month. And the radio broadcast was every Sunday after church. He would drive all the way from Pittsburgh to my part of town that I was living in at that time. At that part of time, I was living out in Westmoreland County. He was leaving Allegheny County and driving all the way out there to go to the radio show. And it was right up over the subway. It was in a news station right above the subway. So every day he went there. The church would, they would go to a meeting and they would say, how much are we going to need for the radio show? And they would run an offering in a private, office. Okay, I've walked in on it. Okay, they ran an offering in a private office, and the ladies, all the secretaries and the women of the church and the men, that were the givers and that, the deacons and that, they would give. And I asked them, how come you ain't never asked me to give? He said, you can give you one. So I went in my pocket and I put in about $20. Okay, because I walked in on it. But they would pay for that daily. They would pay for that every Sunday. They would bring cash, and they would take that cash and turn that cash into a check and give that to the people. That thing's expensive. But he had a radio show for a while. He had the Days Inn event. And then he was pastoring two churches. He had one in Allegheny County and one in Westmoreland County. So he was traveling back and forth. That costs. And people being involved in events, trying to run events at both churches and all this kind of stuff, that costs. Okay, so at his church here in Allegheny County, that was his big church, I've seen him take a seat. I've seen him get up there and ask for a seat, okay, because he needed help with the smaller church. And these people, because his big church was mostly black folks, small church was predominantly white, okay, so the black folks would get a little angry and be like, why is he sowing a seed for them? They just a small church, blah, 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 blah. And he just putting all this into that church. He need to quit that church, but that wasn't the will of God. The people came to him and asked him to pray about running that little church. Because they didn't want somebody that was, they knew who wanted the church, and the people that wanted the church would have made it into a cult or whatever, so they wanted him to try and pastor that church. Now today that church is like a small Orthodox church or something like that, because the people that were running both churches decided that he didn't want to run both churches, so he just only ran the church in Allegheny County, which fell apart. And now it's sitting there collecting dust, and they're having church at a hotel or something. But my point is, everything I said, this brother, John, he said it. And Marvin Sapp confirmed it. Marvin Sapp said it, and he confirmed it. Marvin Sapp said everything I said about that event, and I was not there. I was on the outside looking in like everybody else, but I knew, y'all didn't pay attention and stuff. I knew, first of all, when he said $40,000, I was like, huh? And then when he said, I'm going back to my hotel, I knew he was at a convention center. When he said, shut the doors, I'm thinking that he's at a convention center. The door should have already been shut. He shouldn't, like this guy said, he shouldn't have to tell the ushers to shut the doors. Okay? Now, he did apologize for being like, shut the doors. ushers. Shut the doors. Shut the doors. You know, he did apologize for being over aggressive. But imagine you're telling the ushers to shut the door and they're like, for what? You know, looking around like, for what? That ain't your business. Shut the doors. You the usher. Do as I say. Shut the doors. Me, I'd have been, excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, I got to go back here and shut these doors because apparently they don't know what I'm talking about. I got to go back here and shut these doors. I'll be right back. Okay? And I know when my pastor used to preach at the hotel, there were people out in the hallway and they were loud. And there were people in the hallway, they kept walking in the wrong room. We in there praying. We in there taking an offering. And they would come in there, you know, come right out of the swimming pool, walk in there in a bikini, walk in there in a dress. One day we were in there talking and a couple walked in there and he's pushing her up against the wall, putting his hands up her skirt and everything. And then, you know, she's like tapping him on the shoulder. Look. And they're like, oh, my bad, we're in the wrong place. This is why you shut the doors. Especially when you're somewhere else, you ain't at your own church. That's why, you know, look. Marvin Sapp did not do anything wrong. The only thing he did wrong was he put it on YouTube. He allowed it to be put on YouTube. Because let me tell you something. YouTube is like you leaving your car, okay, in Chicago at the gang site. Okay? YouTube is like you leaving your wife waiting for you for too long, okay, at the gang site in Chicago, in the projects in Chicago. She's standing there in her nice little outfit and her little raincoat with her purse in her hand, just waiting for you to pull up. Okay? Anybody with common sense knows you don't want to do that in Chicago at night, okay? That's what YouTube is like. Whatever you leave there, or whatever's put there, they'll take it. You know, I've been here in Pittsburgh. People go in hospitals and shoplift at hospitals. When I did security at Shadyside Hospital, people walk in that hospital and you sit your phone down next to your purse while you talking to somebody. Somebody sit catty corner to you and, you know, right in front of you, just snatch your phone. Okay? One girl got arrested because she took this other girl's phone. And the funny thing is, the girl was a security guard. And she sat down her phone for a minute, and this girl that was visiting family or whatever at the hospital grabbed her phone. And so she's watching the girl 5 minutes later trying to get through the code on her phone. So she called security, and they came, and, you know, they tried to, you know, she tried to hurry up and get her family to come back downstairs and leave. And the security officers, because we had two security teams there, we had UPMC police, and then we had our own security team. Okay, UPMC were actually property police. They caught them before they could leave the property. They stopped them in the car outside and said, we're going to need to check everybody's phone. And if you don't want to do that, then we're going to have to call the real police. And this place is going to, you're going to shut this whole area down for everybody. And everybody's going to be mad. But we need to check everybody's phone because we believe you have, you know, and the girl didn't want to put her family through that. So she gave up the phone. She said, here, take it. And they looked at the phone, it wasn't damaged, so they let them go, you know. But this stuff goes on in the city. This stuff goes on whenever you have secularism anywhere near Christianity. Okay? There's a reason why we have our own churches instead of everybody just getting together in the national park, or we have our own churches instead of everybody getting together, on the street or at a hotel or in the back of a barbershop or whatever. There's a reason why we have our own churches. There's a reason why, if you're going to be a pastor, have your own church. Okay? Because, for two reasons. Number one, the privacy. The privacy. And number two, because church people learn how to be church, and they learn how to be Christian. And so, you know how the church goes. You know how we do it. But Marvin Sapp shouldn't have let it get on YouTube. When he said shut those doors, he should have also said turn your cameras off. Turn the cameras off. Because this is what they do. This is what YouTube does. YouTube expose, ladies and gentlemen. This is what they do. Marvin Sapp did nothing wrong, but he's flagged all over YouTube. People, after it's long over with, they're still making content about it. Because they are getting monetized for their content. So, there you have it. But this guy here, shout out to John. Here, I might subscribe to his channel and see what else he's talking about. He's a good-hearted man. He don't know anything about Marvin Sapp any more than I do, other than a few songs that he might like. Okay, but he was like, "Is YouTube stupid or what?" Like, hold up. Are you really looking at this before you make content about it? And again, like I said, everything that I said, Marvin Sapp said. Everything I said in those two videos I did about this, Marvin Sapp also said it. Because I could read between the lines. And this guy, this pastor, this John, he translated and he said it too. YouTube is crooked. YouTube is evil. Sometimes stuff like this makes me want to shut down my channel. Sometimes I just want to get rid of my channels and get rid of my own content and create a channel where I take the good stuff on YouTube, the stuff that ain't even Christian, okay, and post it like a lot of people do. There's a lot of YouTubers, it would be over half the population of YouTube, that does that. They only go out, and if a video is really, really good, it'll put it on their page so that other people, especially if it's a video that they made comments on, okay, they'll post that video on their page, whether it's a video they either extremely disagree with the video, that's why it's on their page, or they really, really enjoyed the video above others, so they posted it on their page. And some people on YouTube do not make content, they just post the better parts of YouTube on their page. And I got friends, I got church friends and that do that. They don't make content. They just take good videos, and if the videos are really good, then the videos are worthy to be on their page. Why? Because YouTube is an idiot. YouTube is evil. And Christians on YouTube are not any better. And I'm going to say it one more time. I'm not defending Marvin Sapp. I'm defending the church, the true side of the church. I'm defending a minister's right to sow a seed and to ask for, a generous seed. I'm defending, the ancient church versus new BS that's going on. Where we ain't allowed to move. We ain't allowed to give $1. We ain't allowed to sing. We ain't allowed to get loud. We ain't allowed to speak in a tongue. We ain't allowed to do nothing without being under scrutiny. The minute you speak in a tongue, the minute you pray too loud, the minute you sing, shake your hips a little bit, anything, You get scrutiny. There's somebody on YouTube, and then it's going to go viral, and others are going to jump on that bandwagon, and they're just going to hate. This is not the Christian church. And the only reason why they're doing this is because it's YouTube. If somebody came to me or my church and they said something went down at the convention center in town, this brother raised $40,000. Ain't that something? We'd have been like, yeah, that's something. We would have been like, I wonder what he's going to do with $40,000. Oh, it must have been for this. It must have been for that. And we would have been like, man, he could have gave that $40,000 to me. I need $40,000. I need $40,000. Yeah, me too. I need $40,000. It wouldn't have been like, oh, we need to go over his church and get up in his face. What right did he have to raise $40,000? Who the heck does he think he is? We're going to go over there and say something to him. We're going to get on YouTube and no. We thought it was hilarious. That, and then somebody else would sit up and say, well, how many of them people do you think gave $20 or $40 or $100 or $800? Probably not a lot. Yeah, like Marvin Sapp said in this video right here, he doesn't even know what the sum of the money was that was raised. He says if it was $40,000 that we were able to raise. But he had to ask. Doesn't mean he's going to get it. Because why? You either give or you don't give. Everybody is just called to be generous with their gift. Being generous with your gift could be $5. Being generous with your gift could be $2. Being generous with your gift could be $50 instead of $40. Or $30 instead of $20. Or $900 instead of $800. It all depends on how the Lord is dealing with you. People don't believe the Lord deals with anybody when it comes to money. It depends on how the Lord's dealing with you. And how you, in your heart, are a generous giver. Because you know you got it like that. You know how rich you are. You know how wealthy you are. You know whether you got it like that or not. I'm just appalled at how YouTube is so stupid. They still don't get it. After a dozen videos, 20 dozen, they don't get it. After listening to this man's sermon over and over, the elevator's still not reaching the top floor. People get so Christian that they forget that we're human. People get so Christian that they don't realize that we live off of money like we live off of water. If you give everybody in that room, you give 10,000 people bottled water, okay? You just bettered your company. You just bettered your company. You just increased the value of your company. Your hotel, your convention center, whatever. I know a place that I just recently worked. We spent a fortune on bottled water. And people were so dumb. These are the same kind of people that would claim Marvin Sapp didn't have a right to raise $40,000 at a $10,000 member convention center. But they'll sit there and walk out with free bottled water every day. That's stealing. That water cost that hotel money. They walking out with free water. They get some food. The food's free, but no, the water is for the customers. The water is for the customers. They feeding the employees for free. The same food they giving to the customers. Okay? And then, like you want water, go get some ice out of the cooler and run some water over it or bring your own bottle of water. No. Or go to the vending machine and get a soda or whatever. No. They will take free water. Take about take about these guys would take about 3, 4, 5 bottles of water and put it in their book bag and walk out of work with it. And then when, sometimes customers come in and they got, a whole table of, 10, 20 people. Yes, we'll take the bottled water to go. So we're running low on bottled water. I'm sorry, we don't have 20 bottles of bottled water. We won't have any more until next week. Sorry. I don't understand what happened. We don't have enough bottled water. But this is what people do. And then they got the nerve to judge people like Marvin Sapp because of what he said and what he did. And I knew what Marvin Sapp was doing. I probably been through it over 5 times coming up in the church. When it's seed time, man, I was going to go to Ponderosa, man, Should I give this generous seat and go to McDonald's, or should I give less seat and go to Ponderosa? My friend said, I talked to a friend that makes more money than me. He was working at Steel Mill. He said, no, go back in there and put that money in church. I got you. People. Money is meant to be spent. It's meant to be given. And it's meant to be saved. Spent on the right things, given to the right people or the right thing, and saved so you can spend it on even bigger things. That's what money is about. Money is not for you to be like, if you can give bread, you can give money. If you can give your neighbor sugar, you can give your neighbor money to go buy some sugar. If you can give your neighbor toilet paper, you can give your neighbor money to go buy some toilet paper. Where'd you get the toilet paper from? Keep your toilet paper and just give them cash. How much is toilet paper? But see, y'all stingy, but y'all want to judge because Marvin Sapp knew how to get a debt that they had to pay. He knew how to get that money today and get it settled. At least that's what he tried to do. And that's not saying that everybody that had a 20 in their pocket could give 20. That's not saying that everybody could give 40. That's not saying that everybody could give 800. They gave what they could give, like he said, if we raised 40,000. He doesn't know. He left. He went back home to Texas. He wasn't at his church. They left that out. Everybody's not talking about that. He wasn't at his church. He was at a frickin' convention center. He was at a convention center. They were supposed to raise this money. And y'all making, Marvin Sapp made his people come up with $40,000. He didn't make his people come up with $40,000. They probably weren't even there. It wasn't his church. It was a convention center. He's in Baltimore. He's from Texas. Whereas vice versa. He's from Baltimore. The convention center was in Texas. Now, I think he said, this guy here said he went back to Texas. He went back home to Texas. After he left Baltimore, he went back home to Texas. He's from Texas. Yeah, because he said, Marvin Sapp is from Texas. Because he left Grand Rapids. That's what he said in this interview. He left Grand Rapids and moved to Texas when he became, when he started, to make his records, multiply and that. He left Grand Rapids and moved to Texas. So, yeah, Sapp is from Texas. Okay? Nobody's talking about that in all these scrutiny videos. Nobody's saying that, he was at a convention center. Nobody's saying that. Nobody's saying, okay, the fact that they were there. The purpose of the event was to raise money. Okay, nobody's saying, nobody really cares why he really shut those doors, or his right to shut the doors. But I'm telling you, YouTube is not the place to go and get advice on how to be a Christian. YouTube is not the place for Christians to tell you anything, because they'll sit there and say something good to you, and then on the next video you'll see them criticizing another Christian, and as a non-believer, that's not going to fly right with you. It don't fly right with me, and I'm a Christian. Dude, I just sat there and listened to an hour of you preaching a good sermon, and then all of a sudden you going around on YouTube calling everybody a false prophet just because they do things different than you. I can't dream and talk about my dream because that makes me a false prophet. I can't dance. I can't talk about oil. I can't talk about water. I can't sow a seed. I can't ask you to sow a seed. I can't do nothing without you getting on YouTube and making me a case, making me a police file. I can't do nothing. YouTube is a joke when it comes to issues like this. It's a joke. It really is. YouTube is a joke. Even Christians on YouTube, they're a bigger joke than the devil's people on YouTube. They are. They really are. Even Corey Minor. Corey Minor, if he's a bright person, he'll go back and apologize for what he said here. If Corey Minor is all that in a bag of chips like he tries to be, he'll go back and he'll say, you know what, I'm going to revisit this Marvin Sapp case, and I'm going to say, hey, let's talk about some things I didn't know. No, he criticized. Now I gotta admit, when he first got on Ricky Smiley, when he first got on Ricky Smiley, he sounded like a quack, like he was trying to cover up for something. But as he was able to relax a little bit, as the interview calmed down, he was able to tell exactly what I knew happened at that convention center. I knew what was going on. I knew it. And both of them translated it the way I knew it. Oh my God. I wasn't there any more than you were there. But I knew what was going on. The minute he said, I'm going to go back to my hotel. Oh, that's not his church. That was the camel that broke the straw's back for me. Or the straw that broke the camel's back for me. Like, oh, he's going back to his hotel. So he's not at his own church. The other thing that broke the camel's back was when he said 1,000 of y'all can give this. I'm thinking, there's over 1,000 people in that room? Another thing was when he talked about, he put his $100 down first. Or it might have been $800, who knows. But he had a whole bunch of cash in his pocket. He put it down on the podium as he was saying this, and he said, it costs to be up here. And he says, I need y'all up here to put your 20 away. I need y'all to give 100. Yeah, he gave 100. Okay. And each minister before him asked for a certain amount. So it was obvious to me that they're raising a fund. They're raising money for something that they're trying to achieve. They're trying to build something, or they're trying to buy something. Something that costs money. more money than, the average seed sowing. Okay? So, I knew what was going on here. But everybody else, Marvin Sapp, what a false prophet. He asked the congregation for $40,000 and then he locked them inside so they couldn't go nowhere. Oh my God. Oh my God. Let me out of here. Thank you for watching Leroy Cruz, your Life Applications Officer. Cruz for Christ. Thank you for stopping by.